All right, we've got a great group in here. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started for today. Welcome to everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time out to join us. My name is Rebecca, and I'm the Manager of Institutional Relations here at EF Gap Year. It's been a real joy for me to spearhead our webinar series, and I'm really excited to have all of you joining us today. We have a great group of parents here who are at various stages of that gap year planning process. Some of you have students who are already enrolled in our program. Some of you are just considering the idea of a gap year. So no matter where you're at or where your sort of planning is going right now, this session is designed to be helpful for you and useful for you in that whole process. So our goals for tonight are to give you the basics of what a gap year is and what the benefits are, what we call the gap year advantage. We're also going to talk about your role as a parent in your student's gap year journey and provide you with some of the resources so that you can feel confident and prepared in supporting your student and navigating with them through this gap year experience. Just a couple of quick Zoom etiquette reminders for everyone. Everyone should be automatically muted to keep that background noise to a minimum. I know you'll have a few questions as I go along, so our goal is to answer some of them along the way and save some of them for us to answer at the end of the presentation. I want to point out that I have two amazing colleagues here joining me. You can see Katie there. She's our Director of Customer Experience and works really closely with students throughout the program. So she'll be presenting a few of the slides near to the end of the presentation, and she'll also be going through those Q&A questions with me. My colleague Lauren is also here. She's on the keys. You can't see her, but she's there behind the scenes answering some of your questions by typing them out throughout the session today. I'm really grateful to both of you for joining us today. But for now, we're going to turn off our videos, but we will be walking us through this presentation, and we'll turn those back on at the Q&A so you can see us then. All right. So just to give you a quick idea of this agenda tonight, as I said, we're going to focus on a few main themes, but we'll start off with these global updates, kind of giving you a sense of where we're at right now. Then we'll talk about a gap year, the what, who, and how of taking a gap. Then we'll go through what this gap advantage really means. We'll talk about your role before, during, and after the gap. That's when Katie will come in. And then we'll have that Q&A time to answer any questions that might be on your mind. So I want to start off with something I know is on everyone's minds right now, parents, students, everyone. The whole world is really grappling with the changes that the COVID pandemic has brought about. So looking at the gap world specifically, taking a gap right now means thinking even harder about the world around us and what it makes sense to do from a health and safety perspective. So as I go through this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more generally about the concept of taking a gap and how parents are part of that process. But I do want to make a note of a few things that we're doing to be proactive about this global situation before we get started. To give you just a quick idea of what we here at EF Gap Year have been doing, we've been sort of planning for every possible future we can imagine. We have an amazing dedicated team that's working on our response to this issue. And our number one goal, as it has always been, is to give students a safe and healthy global experience. So our staff across the globe is working to make all necessary modifications to itineraries, safety protocols, contingency plans as we plan for this coming year's programs. Our organization, EF Education First, has offices or schools in 114 countries, which is an incredible global infrastructure that allows us to both stay up to date on what's happening in each individual location, as well as to enact all those necessary precautions. So if you're a parent of a booked student, you've already actually heard a lot of these really specific things that we're implementing for this year from my colleague Katie. So Katie will also be hosting some future webinars for you to give you all the details as the departure date grows a little closer. If you are thinking about a gap for this coming year or in the future, rest assured we are thinking through all of these options and precautions, and our whole team will be in close contact with you throughout your gap process. This is a great link as well. Make sure to check that out. This is a place where we are continuously updating our policies, any changes, all of those safety precautions that we're implementing on the ground. You can find all of that info at this site on our website. So definitely check that out if you have any more questions. I already talked a little bit just now about us as an organization, but I just want to give you a little more info about us here at EF and how we can be a resource for you as you go through the gap year process. So at EF, our mission is opening the world through education, which is something that we've been doing for 55 years and something that we're still feeling really excited about and confident to do moving forward. We actually think that this mission is perhaps even more important today in the midst of a global crisis like this. This is when we really need more global citizens, more people thinking outside the box, more people who are ready to tackle these global issues that we're facing today. Our educational philosophy here at EF Gap Year is really shaped around preparing students for life, and we do so by providing this personalized support throughout the global experience. I hope that kind of gives you an idea of who we are and how we at EF are looking at the future. So now I want to take it back a little bit. I want to break it down to these very basics. What is a gap year? Obviously, all of you have heard that term before, but I always love revisiting this definition from the Gap Year Association. They define a gap year as a semester or a year on, typically taken between high school and college, in order to deepen one's personal, practical, and professional awareness. I really like this definition. I think it's really succinct and there's a lot packed in there. I especially love the wording that a gap year is a year on and not a year off. You may have seen in the news lately, there's a lot of talk about more students than ever who are thinking of taking a gap year next year. But I think some of these articles miss the point of a gap, that it's not just a time for you to sit on your couch fighting time, but it's actually an intentionally planned time for self-growth and exploration. So students can do a ton of different things on a gap, but they all come back to this idea that it's a time for them to learn and to grow and to develop in new ways. That being said, getting a little personal for a moment, that's the official definition, but I think I want to share with all of you my own gap story to bring that definition to life a little bit. So when I was in my senior year of high school, I'd had a great high school experience. I was really excited to go to college. I'd been accepted to my dream school, Georgetown, but I knew that I wanted to gain some real-world international experience before heading to campus. So I decided to take an intensive language-focused gap year in Turkey, which taught me so much. It taught me a new language. It allowed me to live with a homestay family and understand another culture in a way I could never have imagined. And it gave me insight into the history and politics of this country and of the region. And ultimately, I think the biggest thing that I got out of it was that it prepared me to be successful in college and in my life in the field of international education beyond college. But thinking about for me personally, I was the only student at my high school to take a gap year. And I actually had never even heard the concept of a gap year before I sort of stumbled upon this program that I ended up pursuing. And when I graduated from high school, I faced a lot of misunderstanding from my community about what a gap year was. My college counselor at my high school and other members of my community were pretty dismissive of the idea of taking a gap. They really saw it as me deviating from this traditional path, and they feared that I wouldn't come back to start college. I questioned my decision a bit too, facing that, even though it was something I knew I wanted to do, I felt like I was doing something wrong in some way by deviating from this path that had been laid out for me. But I was really lucky and really grateful to have the support of my parents, the support of my family, who really understood and promoted the benefits of travel and experiential education. And they really knew that the gap experience would only actually add value to my college experience in the future. So it came true. When I came to my college campus after my gap, I really thrived in a way that I'm certain I wouldn't have been able to do if I hadn't taken a gap. And I'm speaking both about the academic realm and the social realm. And that support from my family really made my gap happen. And that's why I'm so excited to talk with all of you today, because each of you has such an important voice and an important role in influencing your students' next steps. My gap experience has obviously stayed with me in college and beyond. I've now lived and studied and worked in countries across the globe, but my gap year really remains the root of those experiences. It gave me this confidence and adaptability that allows me to really bloom where I'm planted, to make the best out of every situation, and to be able to strike up a conversation with just about anybody. So the connections I made there stayed with me too. I chose these photos. You can see my host family there on the left, Idem and Yasemin. I think I've now visited them 5 or 6 times since my gap year, and my family from the US has also gone to visit them. In the middle of is my cohort of fellow gappers. I'm still really close with them. We just had a Zoom catch up a few weeks ago. So this is just a part of my story. I could probably do a whole webinar on that, but I will spare you all. But it's just one story in a huge bucket. I had so many moments of challenge and growth and learning during my gap year, and every gap year student has that same experience of challenge and growth, just in different ways. So no matter who your student is, where they want to go, what their goals are, a gap year will profoundly shape them in positive ways they could never anticipate. And you all have such an important role in this. As you know, your support and knowledge about this topic has the potential to dramatically change your student's life for the better. So I'm here tonight to help you be a little bit more informed about gap years, their benefits, and to give you some of those resources that you need to really understand your student's gap process and to think about how to support them throughout the entire trajectory of that experience. Okay, that's my story, enough about me. I want to get into a few of the different types of people we see who take a gap. And I know looking at this list, I certainly checked off a few of these boxes. There are quite a few different categories of students that we often see when we talk to students who are thinking of taking a gap or for whom a gap would be a great fit. You can kind of think of this list almost like a checklist. Many students will tick multiple boxes here, but almost all gap students will fall into at least one of these categories. When you're thinking about your student's gap path, I think it's really helpful to identify some of the motivators that have brought them to this experience. I think this can help guide you right from the beginning of the process, deciding on what the right gap path is, all the way through to preparing for that gap year and taking those next steps afterwards. Identifying these motivators really helps you and your student identify the goals of the gap experience and know what you both want to get out of it. One piece of advice I kind of highlighted here I would give to everyone is that there's no ideal gap student. There's no right or wrong. There are so many different options and benefits to a gap for a variety of different students. So just to read out a few of these, many students who are top achievers may feel burnt out after high school and they want to have a time to really explore the world around them and learn outside of the classroom. We talk to a lot of students also who are trying to sort of discover who they are, go through that process of self-exploration. Maybe they'll discover a new passion or rediscover one that they had kind of let go. It's a great time, and we hear so many stories from our alumni about, new interests, new college majors, new projects that they're pursuing after their gap. A lot of our students also want to gain real-world experience and explore social issues in a hands-on way. So a lot of times this looks like service learning, this looks like cultural immersion, those kinds of experiences where they can, be outside the classroom and be really learning through living. We also see, and these two checkboxes kind of conflict each other. We see students who are not really excited about their college options or their current college path, and they want another year to grow and to challenge themselves and to submit or resubmit their applications. On the other hand, we see those students who are really excited about their college choice and want a year to just grow and be able to come to campus even more ready to make the most of that experience. Finally, we see students who have a really specific goal. So maybe they've been studying Spanish all through high school. They really want to get that language down to a proficient level. Maybe they really want to work in the marketing world and they want to have an experience with an internship or work experience in that realm. So we see all sorts of types of students. Many of them tick these boxes, and it's a great thing to keep in mind when talking with your student. So our overarching goal here at EF Gap Year is not just to grow our own program, but to expand the level of consciousness surrounding the concept of a gap year throughout the US. So right now, about 1.2% of students defer their enrollment at college, and this percentage I think will definitely rise with this coming academic year. And while we don't foresee that percentage growing to 100% per se, we do believe that a much larger percentage of college-bound students can really benefit from a gap year. So there are many different types of gap experiences, and we encourage students to look at their options and think about what they want to get out of their gap. With that in mind, each student can really make an informed decision about what they want to do. What kinds of activities do they want to do? What skills do they want to gain? How structured do they want their experience to be? These are all great questions to start conversations within your family. These are a few buckets that gap year experiences sort of tend to fall into. Of course, there are a lot of subcategories in there, but these three buckets, or some combination of these three, make up most students' gap experiences. So these, looking through these options with your student and understanding where their interests and goals fall within them can really help you as a family find the right gap path. What really remains constant throughout any of these buckets is that students are learning through living. They're out there having these experiential learning moments. They're engaging in new ways and growing personally. For our EF Gap Year programs specifically, we combine all three of these into our educational philosophy, which is centered on building global skills, awareness and empathy, life readiness, and a growth mindset. I also want to break down a misconception, one that actually many in my community had when I took my gap year, which is that students don't go to college after taking a gap. Actually, the data shows that this is completely false. Actually, 90% of those who take a gap year enroll in college the very next year. So not only that, but what's really cool is that they consistently outperform their peers who went directly to college, both inside and outside the classroom. It's, I think, really important to stress here that a gap is not a detour or a cop-out. It's a really important building block to your future success. There are these tangible and practical results for those who have taken a gap. So one that I want to highlight is that students are better prepared for college life. They're more confident, more adaptable, more ready for the college environment. Speaking personally, flying halfway across the country to start college after my gap felt like a breeze. I'd already flown halfway across the world to be on my gap for a year, so felt like no problem at all. Another thing I want to point out is that, I think this is an incredible statistic too, studies have also shown that taking a gap year is actually tied to an increase in college GPAs. I've seen this statistic for quite some time now, but I was talking to a recent alum of ours a few weeks ago, and she really brought this statistic to life for me. She took a gap in the middle of college, and we were chatting about some of the research about how gap years benefit students when they return to campus. And she saw this done. She said, wow, that's actually what happened to me when I got back to college. I've gotten straight A's since I got back from my gap, and I never really put those pieces together. So I love stories like that because they really bring these statistics to life. Finally, I want to point out that students have more leadership roles. This is such a key part of any gap year, and we really focus on this with our EF Gap program specifically. Being on a gap really gives students the opportunity to flex their skills in planning and organizing and understanding group dynamics. And it's just really no wonder that studies show that when students return to campus, they're actually getting more leadership roles on campus and beyond. I also think there's no greater proof that what gap years do is incredibly impactful than statements like this from top colleges who support gap years and firmly believe that their campus is a better and a more vibrant and a more interesting, more special place because of students who take gaps. I really love this quote from Harvard. I'd encourage you all to pay a visit to their admissions page and read this whole essay on there. It's really great. It basically goes over the fact that for over 40 years, Harvard has been recommending that its students take a gap year. And actually in their acceptance letters, they propose that students take one. They believe that it's so valuable that in their dream world, they say all students would take a gap year. I just think that would be so cool. Another thing that I want to emphasize here is this quote from the Dean of Admissions at Middlebury, another super pro-gap college. And basically what he's saying is that the same thing that colleges across the country are seeing. They're seeing their gap students coming to campus more mature, they're making higher grades, they're having higher self-reported happiness, and they have more gratitude for the college experience. These students are maximizing their college experience from day one. As soon as they step foot on campus, they're really ready to make the most out of this opportunity. I think this is especially crucial to note because while higher education today is more important now than ever, it also comes with a high price tag, a high level of competitiveness. It's really important when thinking about college as an investment in a student and in their future success, that students go to college at the optimal time in their lives and in their personal development for them to be able to get the most out of it. There's also a cultural shift that's been happening gradually for a while now here in the US. So in Europe, for example, in many countries in Europe, taking a gap year is the norm. It's actually a little bit weird if you don't take a gap year. So while we're definitely not at that point yet in the US, we are seeing a really increasing awareness of the positive effects of a gap. And we're so excited here at EF to continue to develop this cultural shift towards taking a gap that helps more students enter college and enter life more successfully and feel ready to maximize their potential. On that note, I just want to summarize quickly these sort of high-level benefits of a gap by putting them into 6 big buckets that I hope will help you remember them. The first is being better prepared for college, as I mentioned. This 2008 study, for example, showed that qualities that are specific like planning, task management, persistence, these are all higher for students who took a gap than students who didn't. The second is higher grades. As I mentioned, this is quantitative data from several studies showing that students who had taken a gap year are more likely to graduate with higher GPAs than people who went straight to college. The third is more leadership roles, understanding how to be part of a group, how to organize, how to deal with difficult situations, all of which lead to more leadership roles on campus and beyond. The fourth is more socially aware. Students are in different cultural environments, they're exploring outside their comfort zones, they're learning how to navigate a new environment, and they're really gaining a global perspective on social, political, and economic issues across the world. I love this stat as well. This is crucial to note, I think, that students who take a gap actually graduate faster than students who don't. Data across the US shows that about 60% of students are taking more than 4 years to obtain their undergraduate degree. Taking a 1-year gap actually allows students motivation and interest in what they're studying to be renewed. So a lot of students are feeling a little burnt out after high school. They want to be able to reset, get excited about learning again. Maybe some students have never really found their thing and they're really using that gap to explore their passion for the first time. Some students also just don't feel ready for college or for next steps, and taking a gap is what helps them develop their personal skills to feel confident and excited when coming on campus. No matter where your student's at, this is a great statistic that I think shows that overall, gap students are able to maximize their time on campus and make the most out of it. I also love this last bucket. I think this is great when looking towards the future. Students who take a gap actually have better first jobs. So 88% of gap year graduates report that their gap year had significantly added to their employability. I think even more than that, a gap year really allows students to see different versions of success and figure out what a meaningful career and a meaningful life path looks like for them. So now we've talked about this gap year advantage. I want to sort of pivot to talking about planning for a gap. What role do you play during the time that your student is planning for a gap? The first piece of advice I think I would give is that validating the gap path is really important, especially in a community where the concept of a gap year isn't super well understood. This is where all that knowledge you now have heard about the gap advantage really comes into play. You can be the expert about what a gap year entails, and you're really able to advocate for your student. The next is to really listen to your students' stories, passions, concerns, goals. The gap experience is something that is a little bit different for everyone. So really understanding what your student wants to get out of this experience will help you support them throughout the entire trajectory of their gap experience, from figuring out what they want to do during their gap all the way through the end of the program and transition back to life in the US. If you're in the beginning stages of planning for a gap, definitely encourage your student to start the gap process early. This really gives them more time to plan, both mentally, practically, financially. There are so many different great gap year scholarships out there as well, both through us here at EF and externally. And these are great opportunities whose deadlines can pass if your student waits until last minute to get started. That being said, this year in particular, we are talking to a lot of students who are thinking about a gap next year. And because of these unique circumstances, we are really supporting and trying to give students as many resources as we can if they're thinking about a gap later in the year than usual. Next, really share with your student different options about gap programs. You'll note that I'm not saying here that you should choose a path for them. It's really important that you are supporting them, but letting them take the reins. The more agency they have from the beginning, the more they'll feel invested in the entire experience, and the more they're ultimately going to get out of it. I think, though, your voice is really key to letting them know about all of their options and letting them know that they have your support. This last one ties into that same kind of theme, which is that it's really important to be receptive to your students' ideas. For example, you may think that because your student has loved their French classes all through high school that they should continue to study French during their gap, but perhaps they're drawn to pursue Japanese in Tokyo. This is a really great time for students to take chances, to explore passions, both old and new, and really assert themselves in the world around them. So by listening to them, by hearing them, you're validating them as an adult who will be responsible for themselves throughout the gap experience. Also thinking about the role you play, it's really important to discuss how taking a gap fits into those college plans. It's great to think of planning for a gap as ultimately a part of the college process, not a detour or an addition. If you're in those initial stages of college planning, this is a great time to also be discussing gap options and really planning for that gap. You can even research gap-friendly colleges and scholarship info. Talking with your admissions officers at prospective schools about taking a gap is a really great option, as well as asking them about that deferral timeline and what that process looks like at the schools that you're applying to. Finally, you can think about how your student can earn college credits. For example, in our program, students can earn up to 9 college credits, which really allows them to come back to campus with some of those core requirements checked off. In addition to those college credits, there are just so many other skills that a student can gain during a gap. We've already talked about a lot of them, but talking through those with your student is a great way to keep them focused and keep them engaged in that gap experience. So if your child is headed to or considering a gap for this coming year, that is so exciting. Sometimes in this summer before departing, students can feel a little left out when friends are discussing their college plans. So this is a great time for you as well to remind your student that they still will have that amazing freshman experience in college, and they'll bring even more to it after their gap. So I want to now introduce my colleague, Katie. Katie is the Director of Customer Experience here. She oversees all our program participants, and she and her team work really closely with students and parents throughout the trajectory of the program. So she's going to share some of her wisdom about what it looks like during and after the gap, and she'll reflect on those transformations that parents see in their students after they get back from their gap. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie now.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, so I am going to talk to you about during the gap and after, and then happy to take any questions from anyone here. Thank you, as Rebecca said, for joining us tonight. So let's talk about during the gap experience. So as Rebecca mentioned, once you actually enroll in our program, every single student is assigned to an advisor. And so that's where my team comes into play. And we work with all of our students, preparing them for departure. And then the advisor actually works with that student throughout their gap experience. So they're with them from, before they set off for months down the road preparing, and then of course for the whole experience. And as we get closer to departure, we'll host multiple webinars about what to expect, both for parents and also plenty of guideline trainings and ways to get excited for our students. So we'll be going into much more specifics, but it is really important at any point during your planning process that you consider what it does mean as a parent to support your student on the program. So we'll just talk through some of those things right now. First and foremost, one thing that I'm sure you're used to with your students, day before school starts again, things like that, but really being ready for those last minute jitters. All of your students that sign up for this are doing something brave. As Rebecca mentioned, they're kind of going against what might be considered the typical path, although we obviously are seeing many more students partaking in this, but they're nervous, and that's completely normal. Even our most outgoing students tell us later, oh my gosh, the week before I left or getting on that plane was so nerve-wracking. So I think as a parent, letting your student know, every single one of our students admits to us how nervous they were before. They feel anxious, varying degrees, of course, but that they are not alone. One of the things that I think is also always important to point out is our alumni. Whenever we do a lot of fun, interviewing and getting feedback and tips from our alumni. And one of the things that they always say is, I wish I could go back and tell myself, don't even worry, everyone is in the same boat. So I would say the vast majority of our students do not know a single person when they arrive. And they found that within the first day of program, they are able to easily meet people. Everyone's in the same boat. It's so easy to meet and, of course, make friends. And I'm talking, not everyone's outgoing. We have all different types of students. So it's just that very friendly, welcoming environment because everyone is kind of taking this step together. And of course, they spend so much time together that it's easy to kind of break down those barriers and get to know each other pretty well. Another thing that is really important to consider, and this would be, closer to departure, but how do you plan to communicate with your students? So first of all, in what type of platform are you going to be FaceTiming, texting, WhatsApping? WhatsApp is for those of you who aren't familiar, it's an app that our students definitely use once they're abroad, and it's an easy, free way to communicate back home if you're on Wi-Fi. But this is a really important one to really discuss as a family before your student travels. I think it's really important to have expectations of, I'd love to hear from you once a week or whatever that looks like, that you feel comfortable with, that your student also feels comfortable with, but also keeping in mind that our students are very busy on the road. And we really, really want them to be fully immersed. So if they're constantly on their phone, or if they're constantly kind of living vicariously through what's going on back home or with their, friends that are off at college, it can be hard for them to avoid, homesickness and things like that can certainly creep up, especially if they're constantly talking about what's going on back home. So just things to be aware of and kind of set yourself and your student up for success are great things to talk about before travel. And then also along those same lines, no news is good news. We always say this at EF. We are on the ball and in touch with all of our groups. And Rebecca talked about our worldwide presence. But basically, if you're not hearing anything, it's more often than not because your student is very busy. They might not be connected to Wi-Fi, but they're probably just fully immersed and having a wonderful time. So that's also something to kind of live by in travel. And then this is kind of my favorite thing, but being ready for sneak peek transformations, small and large, that you will see. Some of it happens very gradual. A lot of parents will say when their students return, if they're on the gap year program over winter break, is when they're like, oh my gosh, he carries himself differently now. He's confident, he can make decisions, they can already, and even the student might not know yet, have noticed it until they're home and their friends that are freshmen in college are pointing it out, like, wow, you seem all of a sudden older. But you also might notice it in those little moments that you're catching up, FaceTiming while abroad. Everything from your student talking about how they are navigating their new city that they live in, public transportation, and using the local language, to just talking more confidently about their future, and like I said, the way they carry themselves, all sorts of things like that. But that's the really exciting stuff that you get to see. We get to see it as the staff that work with these students, and it's really amazing. And the beautiful thing is, by the end of the year, the students see it themselves, and we do a lot of actual reflection in the final week of program, where even peers talk to each other about, like, oh my gosh, I remember when you walked in first day, this and that, and look at how far you've come. So it's really a beautiful thing to witness, and certainly why this experience is so powerful. And along those lines, understanding the ups and downs of culture shock, also just the ups and downs of what this experience is. Not every single day is, best day ever, as teenagers like to say. I think the students on our program eventually learn that growth really happens at the edge of their comfort zone. But in the beginning, that can be really tough, right? Like moving into with a host in Barcelona where our student doesn't speak any Spanish and the host is only speaking in Spanish to them. That is really tough at first. And some students are like, oh, I don't know, maybe this is the wrong idea. And then they give it 3 days and 4 days and 5 days and like, oh, wow, I'm really picking up on this. So I think as a parent, just reminding your student of, encouraging them, cheering them along. Their advisor does that same thing, but getting that also from you at home of like, no, remember why you signed up for this. That's what the experience is all about. And that's actually how you're going to change and grow. So those are all really important things to keep in mind during the experience. And then, of course, after, as I mentioned, these transformations. So your students will come home with new ideas, and certainly new independence and confidence. I think one of the biggest things students report is just feeling much more confident, not only in like themselves, but also in what they want to do with their life, and going to college, feeling confident that they're ready at this point. Feeling more mature, and sometimes even feeling, comparing themselves to their peers now that are back home, feeling a lot more mature than them. And finding out interests that they love. I remember actually speaking recently with one of our alumni, Annabelle, who went to Costa Rica and during service learning worked with our coral reef restoration project and realized how much she loved that, had no idea. And decided to study marine biology because of that. So finding these new things about themselves that they didn't know, they kind of dug in and found and are really proud of and confident, and it could dictate what they do next. Of course, there's the idea of reverse culture shock. So students definitely will go through a period of this fast life on the road, meeting lots of people, meeting very worldly people, and then coming back to hometown and having to adjust. And that it happened on the way out, them adjusting, and it's going to happen on the way back. And that's totally normal. We are certainly here to support our students in whatever they might need as they get home. But just understanding, it's almost like they're going to be homesick for their peer group, their experience, maybe their homestay, their tour directors, all of that. They'll definitely have that flip side. And of course, over time, it goes away, and letting them share their stories and all of that is part of that. And then just all these, what is next in their transition. We do talk in the last week in reflection about what's next and setting goals for what are their next steps. And most of our students are headed to college the following fall. But obviously just, what needs to be adjusted and just thinking through what that looks like. And then of course, you will be inundated with stories, photos, and memories. It's a huge, huge piece of, for our students, their lives, and for a lot of them, kind of the biggest thing that's ever happened to them. So, you'll certainly be, you know, following along, hearing a lot about all this experience and everything you've invested in. So it's another really fun part of it all. I also wanted to show this testimonial from a parent. Actually, this is from one of our GAP alumni, Andy. She just finished her program this spring, and her mom sent this in to us. And I won't read the whole thing to you, but it's along the gist of what we hear from parents. You know, her daughter had changed and transformed so much. We hardly recognized her as our daughter. And she actually went and visited Andy while she was abroad. And she says one of the most poignant moments was sitting in the back of a cab, listening to Andy have a lively conversation in Spanish with her homestay mother. I barely heard Andy utter a few words from her high school Spanish before she left. And then just again, like everything that she learned, growing, making deep friendships. And you know, in this final paragraph, obviously I can't say enough about the program, but it's our daughter that is forever changed as she prepares to head to college this fall. The angst and uncertainty I may have felt as the parent of an incoming freshman does not exist. And so obviously Casey is a, you know, big proponent and saw so much in Andy, and Andy's off to college this fall, and just one of our really many great alumni that we have on the program. So happy to share that quote. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Rebecca, for our final takeaways, and then we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. I love your perspective on all of this because, you know, you work so closely with these students and get to see that whole transformation from beginning to end. So lots of great insight. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just want to wrap up by talking about 3 big takeaways. You know, if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, I think these are the 3 big points that we want to hit. The first is to really know about that gap advantage that I talked through. Learning about those benefits of taking a gap and spreading awareness about it is really helpful for your student as an individual, as well as for, you know, community understanding about a gap as a concept and what that looks like and what those really proven benefits are. The second is to have that open and honest dialogue throughout the entire process, before, during, after the gap. It's really important that you communicate openly, that you're able to discuss what those goals are, what the fears are, what the, you know, what those fun moments are. Every little piece of the program is a great opportunity to process and to think about how it's going to impact your student going forward. Finally, like Katie said, be ready for those transformations. Big or small, you know, students we're seeing are changing in these unexpected ways. They're developing as adults. They're going into that new world in a really amazing way. So supporting them, being ready for that is a really great way to be an advocate for your student and to support them throughout the GAP process. So Q&A time. I will turn back on my video and Katie will too, and I'll end this screen share here. I know we've had a lot of great questions that Lauren has answered on the keys there, so thank you for that, Lauren. Let's see, video on. Here we go. You can see me with the sun coming through right there.
I know, same.
Great. I saw that Lauren answered a couple of questions about gap year deferrals, so I thought I would hit on that really quickly verbally as well before we answer some of the other questions. We have actually a whole webinar on that gap to college process and how those deferrals work, but we do see a lot of our students who have applied and successfully gotten into the colleges that they want, and then they choose to defer enrollment for a year to do our gap program. If your student's sort of at the beginning of that planning phase, that's definitely what we recommend. It's a great way to, you know, feel confident through your gap that you have those next steps filled out and sort of figured out. And colleges are overall really supportive of that. Like I said, it's a great way to, you know, start that conversation early with your admissions officer, talk about your school's policies. There's some great lists both on our website and on the Gap Year Association's website of what colleges' policies are. Some of them even offer those special scholarships for gap year students. So a lot of great resources out there when thinking about deferrals. So definitely can point you in the direction of our webinar on the Gap to College, which is on our webinar page on our website. So check that out if you have any questions about that. I'm looking through the other questions, lots of good ones in here. What is the Gap Year Association website? Lauren, maybe you can send that out to the group really quickly in that chat box. I see another question about where's the best place to find Gap Year scholarship opportunities, and that's a great resource as well, in addition to our website there. Maybe you can talk a little bit, Katie, about this fall. I have some questions about what programs are currently available for the fall, and sort of what it will look like in this COVID world. Some specific questions include social distancing and mask wearing and stuff like that. So maybe you could just briefly touch on that. I know we mentioned it at the beginning, but if you could flesh that out just a little bit, that'd be great.
No, of course, and I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. So happy to answer that. And I see a few of the different questions. So, for those, because I know people probably have some people on this are booked, and so they know some of these updates. So I'm going to just start. And some of you, this might be repeat, but for our fall programs, we have this Costa Rica immersion program, which is an 8-week program that leaves on October 17th. And that whole program will take place in Costa Rica. So that is one of our fall offerings. And there also is the gap year offering. And for our gap year for this year only, we've moved back the departure date to October 17th as well. So what we right now are looking at, and we're cautiously optimistic that we will depart then. For those unaware, we normally depart in the beginning of September. So we've moved it back about a month and a half to accommodate for the world reopening, which is happening right now. And Europe's borders have opened amongst travelers within Europe. And, eventually we hope to see travel restrictions in the US be lifted. And then of course, allow more all of us to be able to travel more freely. Of course, we're keeping our eye on all of this. And, if we were to look back 3 months from now, the world was completely different. So we know that, of course, nothing is a guarantee right now. But so we do have actual contingency plans and plans behind that as well. But I think I saw one of the questions, if that October departure date didn't happen, what would we do? So there's a few things. One, we'll look at anything possible. So say certain countries we cannot go to, we will build a program that in a safe place that we can go to. Rebecca mentioned, but EF has a worldwide presence, that we have offices all over the world, and not just offices, but programs that we run. So where our program goes right now is not the only places EF travels. And our schools are already opening around the world. So we will certainly look at what can we make possible. We also have a very flexible cancellation. So if we are not able to run a program at all, all options are off the table, we would be refunding. But then we also have a backup plan when this would be an option of, we've already slated out the entire itinerary if we had to move it to the following early 2021. So basically any kind of scenario we have thought through, and we've come up with action plans for. Obviously, you're not going to talk through every single scenario, but the idea being that we are certainly thinking of it all. We have teams both abroad and here really working through, like, what does all of that look like? We feel right now we have a nice window to kind of see. Other programs are traveling internationally soon, and so we want to see how that goes. Not of ours, EF, obviously. And so we want to be able to see how that goes. And we feel like we have a nice window to be able to evaluate all that. We've also extended our risk-free cancellation for anyone that is enrolled. There's no risk to enroll right now and wait and see. So there's that as well. For those asking about social distancing and masks and COVID tests. So again, because we're not leaving until October 17th, I'll tell you what it looks like as of today, but knowing that it will be flexible, because of course we're going to, if any local health officials, anything changes, we'll follow exactly what those local guidelines are. So we will have all of our students bringing masks, hand sanitizer. We will have all of those supplies on hand everywhere that we go. We are doing extra cleaning, as you can imagine. Buses, hotels are all following an advanced protocol now, our homestays. So all of that is being looked at in this state of time right now. And so it's extra sanitation, different types of rooming, actually. If social distancing is required in any places we go, we will absolutely abide by that. We're also just going to be recommending it wherever possible. So even our schools are going to be set up, classrooms a little bit smaller. There's plexiglass between high touch points and customer service points. COVID tests. So as of today, we have not said that we will make them mandatory. We will have some form of wellness check that all of our travelers will have to follow and submit. So we're working with our health like health officials and health advisors, medical professionals on what makes the most sense, both for what's available in the US, what's the most accurate, all of that. So all of that will come out well before departure. To ensure all of our travelers, and they'll have to also do a personal health check, of course, no fevers in the 2 weeks prior to travel, all of that. We're also certified in contact tracing. So knowing how to kind of follow the group and all of that, and prior to departure as well. Rebecca, did you notice were there any other COVID type questions?
I think you hit on the big points.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to say, you probably don't want to toot your own horn, but Katie and her team did an incredible job this spring. When we did have to bring students home, we just have an incredible global presence and the ability to move quickly. And we're really involved in these students. We do all their flight bookings for them and everything like that. So, when the situation did arise in the spring, Katie and her team brought everyone home immediately as soon as that warning was issued by the Department of State. So just really, we have an awesome team, and Katie's really spearheading it. So I want to say that, we are looking out for your students. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, we're there. And I think that's what really sets us apart right now as a program too, is that we have this global presence and this proven track record of navigating crises like this. So just to add on to what you said, Katie, but yeah, thank you for that comprehensive look at the situation. I know that's on everyone's mind right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly on our mind. Safety, of course, we want everyone to have their dream adventure ahead of them, but we want it to be done safely. And I noticed some of the questions are in the chat, and actually there's 3 of this question. So I'll answer this one, which is what happens if someone tests positive while traveling? So the way that this works is, we would follow whatever the local health guidelines are in that country, and they do vary by country. So we have them collected of what they are today. Again, that will change. We have a whole safety and incident response team that basically is constantly updating what this looks like in every single destination. So we're always ready. But essentially based on the severity of the diagnosis, of course, here in the US, we know some people don't even have symptoms. They can be asymptomatic to need, hospitalization more severe. So based on what that looks like, we'll follow accordingly. So it may just mean they need to rest in a hotel, isolate for 2 weeks, and we would have staff there with them, and obviously having the group separate. It also may mean going to a doctor, hospital, that type of care. So whatever it is that they need, we will be there to provide it. And of course, once they're safe once they're well, whether that means rejoining the group if that's what they want, or safely flying home, whatever that looks like. Obviously this is all case by case, but we're ready. Students get sick on tour, on the program. That does happen. So we always are sure to have extra staff and people on the ground to be there to help. Of course, this is not the same exact scenario as just getting sick, but we are ready to isolate or have someone in a hospital and people there to be with them as well.
On that note, maybe you can talk a little bit about insurance. Someone had asked about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So
and how that works on
medical
program.
insurance. So once you're enrolled on our program, and probably actually when you go to apply, you can choose if you want to purchase the EF. We have insurance offering. So it's basically an all-inclusive package that provides medical coverage, trip interruption, baggage loss, a lot of different pieces. But the biggest piece, of course, being medical. So most students are still covered at home with their family's insurance, but this is in addition to that. So we send that out. Anyone can opt in and purchase that. If they do not, we require you to prove that you have valid health insurance for travel. It's extremely important, of course. And so the coverage is very generous in the one that we offer, but of course you can get your own. But in that they're also just amazing with assistance. So the way that it works, to get into the details here, is students do have to pay out of pocket for a doctor's visit, a hospitalization, whatever that might be, unless it's a significant amount of money, and then we would get a pre-approval and have the insurance send the money directly. But they basically pay out of pocket, get the receipts. It's not like healthcare in the US where it's thousands of dollars for everything. So it might mean $100, and then they get the receipts and we help them file the claim. And obviously if you did it with your own insurance, you would do the same, but we wouldn't be familiar with the claims and all of that. But yeah, every student will have to have medical coverage. And if you have specific questions about our plan or whatever, feel free to either pop it in the chat, we can follow up, or reach out to whoever your contact is at EF. We can get you the whole rundown on it.
Yeah, on that, yeah, great questions. On that note too, someone had asked what it looks like if you're trying to figure out what's still available for gap years next year. Definitely don't hesitate to reach out. Each student has an individual gap year consultant. Lauren, who's answering questions right now, is one of them. They're an amazing group of people who really help you and your student both talk through the different options, figure out what path is right for you. For any of you who have already booked, you've worked closely with these gap year consultants and know how great they are at answering questions. So feel free to reach out to them. We'll be sending out follow-up emails tomorrow. Your gap consultants specifically will be sending out some emails, so be on the lookout for that. Definitely don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions in regards to what we talked about today, the program in general, plans for the fall, all that good stuff. There's such great resources for you.
Absolutely.
I'm looking through questions. I think we've answered a lot of them. If anyone has any final questions, please go ahead and throw them in. You guys have been such a great group though, so many awesome questions. And I know Lauren has also sent some links as well to the Gap Year Association's website and scholarships and all of that. So feel free to scroll through those answered questions there. But if we don't have any more right now, I will.
Sorry. Lauren, I know you added the insurance link to someone's question. If you want to throw that into the general chat as well, because it might apply to a few people, that's a helpful way to just look that through.
Yeah.
It is not too late to change modules. Yes. I
know.
Oh yeah. Asking. Nope, it's not too late. And your advisor, if you were already enrolled in the program, your advisor can help you do that. So yes, absolutely. We do want you to do it soon though, because we're going to be introducing all the students to each other soon. So it's super exciting for them to meet. You know, I'm going to Tokyo, who's going with me? So we want to make sure those are all set in stone soon.
Yeah, I love all the different options they have. I think I would have so much trouble picking because they're all so great.
I know. You can't really go wrong.
Oh, I did just get a question about college credits. So SNHU of New Hampshire University, yes, they are aligned with all of our travel changes. That was the question. So you can definitely still apply for that SNHU credit. That's such a great option. I love it both for the college credit aspect and because students who do the college credits actually say that they get more out of the program because they're really taking an academic lens and looking at those program experiences and able to process them. It's a really different way of learning than just sitting behind a screen, you know? They actually are processing all of this experience that they're having on program. So yes, not too late. SNHU is totally behind us. They're really excited about this year. So definitely talk to us if you're wanting to get that college credit option. It's a great thing to do.
Yes, and we will be reaching out soon if you are enrolled, we will be having a webinar about the credits specifically. That will be in August. Actually, we have 2 different credit webinars in August, one for students that are thinking about enrolling and then one for students already enrolled. And yes, exactly. They know about the date changes to our program. We've worked with them on the curriculum and all of that. So all of that will work right in par with the new schedule.
Great. One other question that just came in, if you want to go on GAP in fall 2021, when should you apply? I will say the sooner the better. We do have our priority early decision deadline coming up on September 1st. So that's a great way to get your application in, make sure that you're securing those exact destinations that you want. This is the right time, honestly, to be thinking about it, to talk to us, to explore those different options. So we're here for you. We're ready to start that conversation. We're actually having a couple of webinars starting next week that are targeted specifically to you folks who are looking at 2021. We have our big kickoff. We're launching the application next week. So it's a great time to really be thinking about that, exploring your options and getting that application in. I think a lot of students going into senior year are thinking, I'm a little overwhelmed by all of the things I have to do senior year between college applications, prom, extracurriculars, all those things that you have to do that senior year. Getting that gap year acceptance, figuring out those plans is a great thing to do the summer before. So that's what we really encourage students to do. So you're in the right place thinking about that now.
For 2020 scholarships, is it too late? Talk to if you're already enrolled in the program or thinking about it soon, talk to your gap consultant or advisor, depending on where you are in the program. They might be able to squeeze you in. I'm not sure. Technically, we are just on the edge of the deadline right now, but definitely reach out. They might be able to get you in. I saw also Connie just asking, I think, should we talk to them now about credits? So you're not too late to sign up for credits. And in fact, you can actually sign up for credits up until departure. So right that week of October 12th. So you have plenty of time. In fact, it probably makes sense to listen to the webinar, and then they'll walk you through signing up and all of that then. So again, in August, keep your eyes out. We'll send invitations and whatnot.
Along those same lines about webinar, where to find info on that, we do have a special webinar section on our website. Somebody asked how we get signed up for those fall 2021 webinars. I'll make sure that your GAP consultant sends that out to you, Jeanette, tomorrow. But for anyone who's interested in webinars, whether you're looking to travel this year, next year, 5 years from now, definitely check out that part of our website. You can both see upcoming webinars and register for those, and see some recordings of the past webinars. Like I mentioned, the Gap to College one is a great resource to think through the deferral process and all of that. So definitely use that as a resource as you're planning. All right, deadline for application for 2020. Technically, the deadline's already passed, but we know that this year is a little different, and we want to be able to have students have this experience, especially ones who are looking at next year saying, you know, college isn't looking exactly like what I wanted it to look like. So definitely start that conversation now. We would love to get your student in there. Some of our destinations are filling up quite quickly or almost on the verge of being filled. So if you're thinking about this fall, you're not too late, but definitely get that conversation started sooner rather than later. All right, what a great bunch of questions. Yeah. Well, if anyone does have other questions, your GAP consultants will be following up with you tomorrow. If you're already enrolled, your advisors are there, Katie's there. You have a great team looking out for you to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Katie. Thank you to Lauren on the keys. This was so much fun, and hope it was informative for all of you. Definitely don't hesitate to reach out with any other questions. That's what we're here for. So have a great night, and happy GAP planning.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Take care.